Welcome to another great week on the Ari Goldkind Show on Sirius XM, Canada Talks Channel 167. We have a huge guest for you tonight. Frank Figliuzzi is the former Assistant Director of the FBI. If you watch MSNBC or NBC News, Frank is their security national correspondent. All things FBI, all things Trump. Again, if you watch MSNBC or NBC, Frank is their correspondent. He'll be with us for the full hour tonight. After my opening monologue, we will talk all things Trump, the raid, the affidavit, what it all means, what's classified, does Trump have the codes? Frank and I have a really interesting back and forth discussion on some things that I don't agree with him on. We'll get into a little bit of January 6th. We'll get into threats against the FBI, which he doesn't like. Which I agree with him on, but there seemed to be an awful lot of quiet post-George Floyd about all the threats on police officers. Frank Figliuzzi and I have an incredible discussion. You won't want to go anywhere. It is a lot longer than his usual 3 or 4 minute hit on MSNBC. He and I will have a real discussion, and I think you'll enjoy it. Let's get to my opening statement of the week, and I'm going to give you all a bit of a sneak preview to next week's show. You may have heard that there is a virulent, vicious, garbage-filled anti-Semite walking around Canada or perhaps Lebanon named Laith Marouf, who hates Jews with every fiber of his being, pretends it's only about Jewish white supremacy or Israel. And you may have seen the news come out this week where he got $200,000, just under, of your taxpayer money to teach broadcasters how to be anti-racist. Think that through. This man, who through his politics or a mixture of his politics and religion, literally thinks Jews should be pretty much wiped off the map. That's what he won't say out loud. So he just calls Jews a bunch of different names and pretends it's about Israel. He's the man that you saw, the Minister of Diversity. Think that through. The Minister of Diversity in this country, Ahmed Hussein, come out and say we're canceling his $200K funding and clutching his pearls. Oh, we didn't know about it. We didn't know about it, even though we know that he actually did know about it. I believe he's fully lying. And $200,000 of your money, taxpayer money, was given to this grifter who's one of the most virulent anti-Semites, whether he's a Canadian citizen and lives here or lives in Lebanon. This is the way that Canada is going. The victimizers pretend they're victims. The oppressors pretend that they're the oppressed. The discriminators pretend that they're the ones discriminated against. And if you don't know the name Laith Marouf, we're going to have the journalist who broke this story that's now all over the news with the apology and these tweets and thoughts are vile and reprehensible and we're cutting his funding. The person who broke that news is Jonathan Kay. And Jonathan Kay will be our guest for the full hour next week. And we're going to get into this affair because I can assure you, this is not a bug of the Trudeau government or our body politic or the political discourse. This is a feature. It is open season on two groups in this society, in Canada, in this diverse mosaic. And the two groups that you can say anything you want about are Jews and are about Christians who happen to be Caucasian. If you say anything about any other group, that is completely forbidden. You will get canned for it. And John and I will have a really interesting conversation about the piece of garbage, Laith Marouf, who has been what I call a racial grifter for at least 20 years of his life, and a person who hates Jews more you probably could not find in Canada. So I just say that to you to make sure you tune in next week, because John Kay and I will have an incredible discussion that you don't want to miss. Let's continue with my opening statement of the week. It is high time in Canada that we get to a point, whether it's Canada or south of the border, where we stop assigning virtue to people who do nothing but endlessly virtue signal. Whether it's the prime minister, or if he says up, you know that the truth is down, or the people, as I said just a moment ago, the anti-racists, who you know are the most racist people to their core. Isn't it always interesting that the people who claim they're on the side of anti-racism are always the most racist and anti-Semitic to their core? Isn't that just always a funny coincidence? And if you don't think it's about an old adage that I always maintain in my business, follow the money, these anti-racism grifters are getting wealthy, not just making an okay or decent living, but they're getting wealthy on this scam, this racial grifting. We live in a world now where those who claim racism are literally the most racist. Those that scream for diversity are the least tolerant of diversity. You may have noticed this in your own life. The people who shout that diversity is our strength and try and convince you that that's the case are the ones that permit the least diversity that goes against their core interest. And by diversity, not just the kind of people that are given free rein to live full, liberal, democratic lives here and to have a seat at the table, but the people that claim diversity is our strength are the ones that are actually engineering racism to keep a growing minority in Canada. Google for yourself the percentage of white people in Canada and what is happening to that percentage, whether it's still going to be a majority, as if this is 1975, or if it is a declining majority moving into a minority. Census Canada, Stats Canada will tell you that. But leaving aside the melanin in your skin or your genetic makeup, which is one of the most disgusting and horrible ways to judge people or to award people this or that, it's absolutely disgusting. These people who claim they're all for diversity will tell you that they support a diversity of thought or of critical thinking. Think through the gaslighting of that stupidity, of that insanity. The very people who say that universities are bastions of critical thinking are the very ones closing down and shutting down discussions that involve any critical thought. Think through all the things you're being told today to believe up is down, down is up. What you're being told about genders, sexes, racism, systemic racism, the police, truth, civility, crime. There is no critical thinking allowed anymore, or if there is, you're only allowed to think critically in your head, but they'll come for you, the thought police. You know they'll come for you. They'll even seize your bank account if you dare make a donation based on what you think in your head. You don't have to say anything out loud, but make a donation to a cause that the government doesn't like. That's the thought police. But disagreement to these diversity grifters, disagreement is death. If you disagree with them, you're not just wrong. You're not just misguided. You're not just bereft or missing a few facts. You are dangerous. You are right-wing. You are racist. You are every word ending in IST. That is not critical thinking. That is an ad hominem attack. That is not a diversity of thinking or views. That is the censorship of any view contrary to the oppressor or the victimizer who pretends they're the oppressed. They are obsessed with being oppressed, but they're also the victimizer. And it is high time in this country that a rising tide, that the silent majority not be as silent as it has been for so long. I appreciate that's very difficult for most people who don't want to lose their jobs, their reputation. They don't want to be disliked on Twitter. But the Laith Marouf story that we will get into next week with John Kay is just such a perfect example of the Liberal government and the way so many MPs in that party, in my view, border the most racist, the most anti-Semitic, the least diverse thoughts of probably any government in the world. But because you can only be open season on one or two groups, they get away with it. Let's move off something of that nature and get to a little bit of news of the week. One of the more disgusting things I've seen in the last week is the Joe Biden-Kamala Harris presidency canceling a significant amount, $10,000 of student debt for those who are making under $125,000 a year. Think through what that really is. Think through to a coal miner in West Virginia or somebody who plies a trade or works in an Amazon warehouse, just how much $125,000 a year is to somebody who makes $22,000 or $28,000 or $35,000 a year. You're now going to have people who ran up debt with their liberal arts, their ridiculous degrees that now are totally different than when I went to school and you were actually taught critical thinking, where you were actually taught to debate. You were actually taught to challenge power. You were actually taught to not trust Lord Fauci or Lord Trudeau or Lord Biden or Lord Trump or Lord DeSantis, that you question everything. I have different views of all those people. I'm not lumping them together, trust me. But now those people that went off and got those educations are going to have $10,000 of their debt forgiven or canceled, which is complete horse manure. It's not canceled. The buck is passed. And who is the buck passed to? It is passed to the very people who made decisions or who had life circumstances preventing them from going to the universities, that these liberal arts degree people are now having their debt forgiven or canceled because they make under $125,000 a year. What a slap in the face to ordinary, average Americans, many in flyover country, but many also in cities. What an insult to the many Black and Latino people who couldn't afford to go to university. But so many people who did and lead extraordinarily meaningless lives, not contributing to anything because they've been indoctrinated in these far left universities, they're now getting a $10,000 payout by the Biden government. That's what it is, to get some of their votes in advance of the November midterm. That's what it is. It's pernicious, and it is absolutely disgusting that these people are having $10,000 wiped off the books, which will be paid for by all Americans of a lower income bracket. It is no different than somebody making 125 grand who bought a condo or co-op in New York, having $10,000 of their mortgage passed out and the rest of the country paying for it. It is elitist. It is a false response, which is them going to the universities, make the world better. No. It may have been true 20 or 30 years ago where universities were very different entities, but it is absolutely false now. And it's also an insult to the millions of Americans who ply a trade honorably and don't enter into the Twitter disgusting world of identity politics. It's shameful and it should be called out. I want to talk briefly about the Finnish Prime Minister. You know who that is. That's the young Finnish Prime Minister, a very, very compelling young woman who was elected. And she's now in trouble for dancing in a private home with her friends and drinking, caught surreptitiously on video that was leaked. This kind of garbage story is why people who aren't robots don't run for office, because they dance, they have sex with partners, they go to rodeos, they go to concerts, they drink, they party, they have the normal fun that you and I are allowed to have who don't run for office. This little mini scandal of the Finnish Prime Minister, because she's dancing in a private home, and the mouth breathers on Twitter say that it's undignified that she would be doing such a thing. It's such a shameful, stupid point of view. And when that spreads and metastasizes, it keeps good people out there in Canada or throughout the world. It keeps good people from running for office because you're told that's a skeleton in your closet, which is anything other than. It shows that you've lived a full life, and a politician who's lived a full life is much more interesting to me than a politician who hasn't. Back in 2 minutes with Frank Figliuzzi. We're going to get all roads down to President Trump, the raid on Mar-a-Lago, January 6th, and does he have the nuclear codes? Back in 2.